Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 268 of ReelBlend, a podcast that's still trying to forget that Mutt Williams happened. On this week's show, we're ranking the Indiana Jones movies. We're reviewing James Mangold's Dial of Destiny, and director Lee Cronin is going to join us to discuss Evil Dead Rise, which is now available at home on home video, which is why Lee joined us. By us, I mean myself. Hi, I'm Sean O'Connell, the managing editor here at Cinema Blend, co-hosting the show as always with Jake Hamilton of Fox 32 in Chicago. Hello, Jake. How are you, sir?
You don't wear it often, but my God, man, when you have a collar on, you look fancy.
It's out
you
of
look
character.
nice. You look very vacationed.
I'm very tan. I am very tan.
Glow about you.
I'm peeling underneath.
They look good.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate that. This is how unusual it is that I'm wearing a button-down shirt. When I came out of the office, I did 4 junkets in 3 hours today. That's been that kind of day. And I went downstairs and Michelle saw me in the button-down shirt and she goes, "Are you all right?" That was her response. "Are you all right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. I just dressed up.
You got a haircut too, didn't you? Did you got a haircut as well?
Too? Oh, this is why you guys need to be watching on the YouTube channel, because you get to see all these amazing things that we're discussing. In addition to Kevin McCarthy of Fox 32 in Chicago. Hi, Kev. Good to see you.
Nope.
I'm Fox 5 in DC.
What did I say?
It's okay. You said
Did I
Fox
say
32
Fox 32
in Chicago?
God, it's been a while since we did this. We took last week off.
This is actually, Kevin, this is where we're telling you, your producer's called. You guys have to move. You're swapping cities.
Right.
You're swapping markets.
It's like Freaky Friday. It's the worst Freaky Friday sequel ever.
In a weird way, I am. So I collect the Starbucks mugs every time I visit a new city.
What?
And so I am using the Chicago one today. So that's actually a really interesting coincidence.
That's pretty sweet.
You know who also collects these is Ben Mendelsohn. We had a whole bit about it in our interview for Secret Invasion, which was really funny because he was sitting next to Emilia Clarke, who's talking about Starbucks. And obviously Game of Thrones had the infamous Starbucks cup.
Right.
But I do have a quick question. I don't understand the opening joke. Can you explain it, please?
Do you remember Mutt Williams? Mutt Williams.
That's great. Son of Indiana Jones.
All the better.
Kevin's living your reality that you're
all the better. You have forgotten that Mutt Williams happened. Congratulations. We're all trying to get to your plane of
Mutt is the son of Indiana Jones.
Oh, you're talking about the Shia LaBeouf character?
Yeah, it's Mutt.
Dude, I've only seen Crystal Skull one time.
Okay.
And it was in theaters before it came out. If I would never have guessed that was his name.
You know, we're doing the tier list today.
Oh, no, I've seen all of them, obviously, but I've only seen Crystal Skull one time. And there's a reason for that, but we can get to that later. But so much so, I mean, it's funny because, and we'll get into this later on in the discussion, but there's a great reference in the new Indy to that storyline that I thought was super emotional, but I still couldn't tell you the name of Shia's character until now.
It's Mutt Williams, and I believe it's named after John Williams. Who knows, right? A little nickname to Mutt. So, also one reason you need to go to the YouTube channel this week to watch the show is to see Gabe Kovach's luxurious hair. Gabe, it's looking amazing. I think it looks fantastic.
The only thing better than Gabe's hair is Gabe's Pixar hair.
I've got thick hair, but those are some locks on that character.
More than enough people said you look like Trent Krim from The Independent.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a wonderful concept. Handsome man.
Fantastic. All right, housekeeping. As I mentioned, we are over on YouTube, so give us a like and a subscribe while you're there. Use the comments underneath the episodes. It's going to become the new area where we hang out and interact with you guys and discuss what's going on in the show. We'll have a call to action at the end of this episode. I want to thank everybody who threw us some recommendations for who we look like as Pixar characters, and you're going to have a fun one at the end of this week's episode. So go to youtube.com/ReelBlend podcast. As I mentioned, hit subscribe. Turn on your notifications, and we'll see you there every Friday morning. You can get the audio version of the show everywhere you listen to your podcast. And if you want to sign up for ReelBlend Premium, it gets you an ad-free version of the show and a newsletter from me this week. So check the description in the information of wherever you are enjoying ReelBlend right now, and it'll tell you how to get to ReelBlend Premium. So I know it's Indiana Jones week, and we're going to be doing the tier list. And yes, Jake Hamilton.
Well, I think this perfectly leads into what I think you're about to say. Oh. I would recommend, if you can, YouTube for this week, if only for a moment that happens during our interview this week that you're going to want to physically see.
That's a fantastic tease for the interview that we're about to throw to, which is Lee Cronin. So Warner Brothers Home Entertainment came back around to us and they said, hey, guys, Evil Dead Rise is coming to home video, and director Lee Cronin is doing a few interviews, and we think you guys would have a lot of fun with them. And I hadn't yet caught up with Evil Dead Rise at that point, so I wanted to watch it. And I knew Kevin was talking about how horrifying it was in a good way from earlier in the year. And so we had Lee on. And yes, you're correct, Jake. There's a visual element towards the end, the back half of this interview that you guys are absolutely going to want to see. So if you can this week, go out of your way to try to find us on the YouTube channel, watch the video, and you guys will enjoy it. And in the meantime, this is Lee Cronin, the director of Evil Dead Rise.
We're so excited to have you on. We're massive fans of the movie. Please feel free to geek out as much as possible. We're a filmmakers podcast, and we love getting into sort of the nerdy nitty gritty of things. But I want to start out talking about something that happened after you and I spoke for TV, which is that when the movie came out, a lot of people clipped the title card reveal from the film and basically said, why don't more movies go this hard? Why aren't more movies this artistic with their title card reveal? And I'm just sort of curious, at what point in the process did you guys realize, like, okay, not only are we going with a title card, like it is going to blow your fucking socks off when you see it?
I'm glad you've hit on this one, because I'm glad people received it the way that they did. This was something that was in the screenplay. So the first thing I wrote was that entire opening sequence, and it was kind of like a warm up for everything that was to come. And it's kind of a little bit what the actual sequence is in the movie also. It's like a taste of the experience that's to follow. So I always knew I wanted it to be very gutsy, very operatic, kind of like to just let it all hang out and be like, we're here. So I knew that before I actually reached the end of the sequence. And yeah, like the very first draft of the screenplay and of that sequence, I like to use different fonts and things in my scripts if it's presenting something that gives it a visual aspect. So it's got big giant red lettering. It's described what happens. It wasn't something we found later and thought, that's a cool shot. Could we do this? It was by design. It was written on the page and by design 18 months before I actually went and shot that scene.
Damn. Do you have a favorite title reveal of all time? Sorry, my dogs are very excited. Do you have a favorite title reveal?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm blank. I'm kind of running through my head. I also sometimes like simplicity. Like I really love the opening titles in The Shining, both for the way the camera moves and stuff like that. But the way things roll and the colors that are used is something that I really like. And actually, my previous film, The Hole in the Ground, it's got a pretty gutsy title reveal as well, but it's a much smaller font. I took a little bit more from The Shining in that case, but it's got this big, as I said, looming, grinding music as well. I might have to come back to you on that one someday, because I'm, in the process of talking to a lot of people, so I'm a little blank on even thinking of the name of another single movie right now.
Now, it's interesting. If we had a drinking game for the number of times a filmmaker has talked about how The Shining has influenced them, we would all be wasted.
I've got my Shining
yes. Oh my God. Wait, did you write Red Rum on the Souls, or did they come that way?
That's on
237.
That is fantastic.
I'm a bit of a shoe fan, and I bought these. I feel like I maybe bought these even before I went and shot Evil Dead, and I forgot about them. I found them in a box like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, wow. So yeah, it's an influential movie. I saw it at an impressionable age.
That's incredible. Those are really cool. All right. So you talk about influences and seeing things at an impressionable age. Obviously, Sam Raimi's original films were so influential to you. And, I'm reading up on things interviews you've given prior to this film. And you mentioned Sam inviting you out to lunch, and how it wasn't until kind of at the end when you were leaving that you just off the cuff asked him about Evil Dead. First off, before we get to that, I want to get your reaction to when the email or the call comes that Sam Raimi would like to have lunch with you. And do you ever think about how different life would have been if you hadn't brought that up at the end of the lunch?
Yeah, I do. I would have made a different movie. You know what I mean? I had a couple of other things that I'd written, and I was confident that I could get one of those made. But yeah, it was a nice moment, because I was kind of already in the middle of an exciting whirlwind. So I was in Park City for Sundance, and we actually hadn't premiered my movie yet. I'd arrived, I got altitude sickness, so I'd been like sick as a dog for like 36 hours, and was finally crawling out of my pit of doom and getting, I don't want to say have a good time, because our movie was pre-sold, so I was doing so much press. I'd family and friends there, and I didn't get to hang out with anybody. It was like wall to wall, and a lot of focus and attention, and people wanting to meet, which is great. But it was actually even more intense than the release of Evil Dead Rise, because it was just, you're up a mountain and everything was happening all at the same time. Because I was coming out of nowhere at that point. Nobody knew who I was at all. And I just, the usual emails are coming in, and it was an email, and it was from a guy called Rommel Adam, who Sam works with, just saying, look, Sam has seen the movie. He'd seen it at a press screening in LA. He'd really like to meet. Can we make that happen? And you know what? It was something I'd always hoped, because I'm a fan of what the guys do. Always hoped that I might have the opportunity to just present who I was as a filmmaker. So that was great, because then, I got to enjoy the premiere of the movie. And then I was back in LA for like 2 weeks. And it was the last meeting in my schedule. Not only was it the last thing I said on the way out the door, it was the last thing I said pretty much on the way to a plane to fly back across the Atlantic to Ireland after 3 weeks of this insane journey, debuting my movie and meeting people. So, and it was that thing of like, I'm a fan, but Sam came in as a producer thinking about many things and wanting to know about the things that I was working on. And then towards the end of the conversation, as we were kind of wrapping up, I was like, are you going to do more Evil Dead? And I was really asking as a fan more than anything. Right. And he was like, yeah, well, would you be interested? And I was like, hell yeah. And it kind of went from there.
That's amazing. Damn. That's so great.
Damn. I gotta watch it. Be honest, as I'm watching this movie, there's so many moments where I thought, like, how would Ash have handled this? If Ash were in that room, if Ash were in that apartment, what would he do? So I am curious, does your film exist in the same universe as Sam Raimi's? Like, is there a possibility that there might be some sort of Evil Dead cinematic universe that's going to end up sort of being sort of the Evil Dead version of the Avengers, where all these characters are going to be in one movie together?
I think it's always possible, because in a way, its strength is the shonkiness of its rules, right? Like, there's time travel. There's been so many different things that have happened. To just go back even to the beginning of that before looking into a universe, I think it's like Witch Ash, because he's a very different Ash in each movie. He's almost like a different character. There is that journey that he goes on as he becomes more heroic and maybe more smartass and all of those things. I think Beth as a character has more in common with Ash from the original film, because there's a slight clumsiness. She's not necessarily to the fore immediately. And she has to kind of take on that mantle. So I think in a way he probably would have behaved similarly, like a little bit clumsy, not perfect, not born a hero. But in terms of it all coming together, like from my point of view, there is currently a linear timeline. And that's just my point of view, which is the order that the movies came out in. It's just where the books may and could appear in those gaps between those movies, like where have they been? Where has this book been before it was in the vault? You could go quite far back in time, etc. But to me, it's like they all exist in the same world. Like if someone did their research in this world and looked and was like, oh my God, did you hear about this thing that happened in an apartment block in LA? And someone goes, oh, that was like those teenagers back in the 80s that like out in a cabin in the woods. So to me, it actually runs quite cleanly. And the existence of the three books is established in Army of Darkness and then clarified in Evil Dead Rise in terms of what they are. So even if you look at Fede's book, where was that before the prologue of that movie? I think Bruce talked about it before, like the books in a way are the things that you can use to kind of follow your nose towards them and use them as the place to set up the horror.
You know, Lee, I want to talk about a similar topic, though, about how much, if at all, you were thinking about audience members who might have never seen an Evil Dead movie and who your movie might be their gateway into this. Like, how do you balance I'm serving the fans who are coming to this because they want the next Evil Dead versus a generation of kids, you know, who might be picking this up just because they saw a great poster or some sort of trailer?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. It really is, because I wanted to do both. Like I wanted to make sure I'm a fan and I wanted to make sure the fans were happy. The last thing I wanted to be was the guy that made an Evil Dead film that wasn't an Evil Dead movie in any way, shape or form. But it was very much on my mind from the get-go that I wanted to draw in a new audience. And I'm so happy and proud that that actually happened. Like with the box office success that we had, there's kind of no doubt in anybody's mind that there were new people that came along and maybe didn't even know, just so this is a crazy, scary trailer and what is this insane movie? And they go and watch it and then they learn that there's something more. So for me, the way that I made that work was I looked at like nieces and nephews I have. I thought about myself when I was younger and thought about trying to create an experience that felt like seeing something like this for the first time. And also I needed the tried and tested fans to also experience some new things in this world, for not just to feel like a retread. Because in a way, it's fun, man. People can't quite pin It's not a reboot. It's not a remake. Like the closest thing I could call it is a sequel, if anything, just on the basis of that timeline. It's a sequel that's off on another avenue, down a different bloody artery. And so from my point of view, as I said, I needed and wanted to manage both of those things. I trusted my instinct with Evil Dead. I trusted I could understand the DNA and that I could infuse what felt like a unique standalone movie with those important things, which therefore, as I said, would please the fans, but bring in new people that could the joy is you don't need to know anything about Evil Dead to watch the film.
Right. Yeah, true.
Nice. Lee, no one directs a movie like thinking, okay, I'm going to direct this for streaming. I'm going to direct this for people to watch at home. But there was a period of time where this was going to go to streaming. I am curious if just what exactly happened. Was it like one screening that someone at Warner Brothers saw and went, hell no, absolutely, this is going to theaters. Do you remember when you found out? And what's the moment in the movie that you thought, oh, thank God, now people can see this moment on the big screen?
That opening title, right?
Yes.
Like, it's funny, like there's always, the endeavor to make this movie was that it was going to be a theatrical film. That was always my insight and understanding going into it. But then we found ourselves, because the lifestyle, I met Sam in February 2019. So we were a full 12 months out before COVID hit, and another essentially 12 months out before we even realized how it could come and go and cause all these problems. And theaters are open. Are people coming back? Are they not? What's happening with vaccines? So we were actually in a very, very mixed up time. And at that point in time, I was just glad to be making my movie when it was, kind of determined, because Evil Dead Rise isn't the only film at that time in studios that would have pivoted essentially, because there was a pivot to streaming, because it would have been a theatrical enterprise if it wasn't for COVID. Sure. So it was the pivot to streaming. I just, had great support from the studio, great support from the execs at New Line, from Dave Neustadter and Richard Brenner over there, that were just like, don't lose sight of the movie you're making. And nothing is ever really set in stone in this business. And then it was a case of, because I'm about the theatrical experience. I think people got that when they go to a cinema. If you went to the right theater and that volume was set just right, you're getting that full noise roller coaster, crazy, terrifying.
The volume on that title card reveal is pretty incredible.
It's a loud one. We pushed it.
Yeah.
We definitely
pushed
it. So then like, yeah, then you finish the movie and you start to test it. And even from the early test screenings where it was an imperfect film, it didn't have all the VFX. It had a lot of temporary things. It still has bits of green screen and wires and things that, which affects how people respond to the movie. But the key thing people kept saying is this movie's playing. It's playing in a room. And when it plays in a room, then that maybe that's the best place for it to be. By the end of that post-production journey, when we finished the movie and did the final test screening, it kind of blew the doors off. And that happened in a context where there were new, very senior, very important people in that room, and they got to firsthand experience what this could be, which was not an expensive movie in the grand scheme of things, but then that had the potential to go on and do box office. So yeah, and it's like we had that test screening, and then there was still that gap while you were kind of waiting. And that was one of those spells where you're like watching your emails and phone and ringing everybody, trying to figure out, is there any insight? Deep down inside, I just kept believing. I really did keep believing that it would happen. And then, yeah, it's just like, it's a Tuesday evening and it's like, hey, can you jump on a Zoom? And it's like, yeah, we're going to wide release this movie. And that's a nice moment.
That's amazing. Okay. But we're getting a chance to speak to you on behalf of the home video release. And I have to tell you, the 4K translation and specifically your sound design is incredible. I mean, you keep talking about the title card. I'm going to mention the sound of a scalp hitting a dock right before that.
One. Not the squelchy one.
Oh, man. Talk to me a bit about your approach to sound design and some of the unique things that you did in this, because it's a dark movie. And I want to talk to you about your lighting in a little bit, too, because you choose to kill the power in your location, essentially. But there's a lot of times when sound is driving you through the scene. And I think you do an incredible job of finding unique sounds for each scene.
Yeah, look, sound design is huge to me. It's 50%. Like the soundscape is 50% of what you experience. I remember way back in film school where I didn't learn a whole lot. You know what I mean? I was just rebellious young guy in film school trying to figure out who he was and what he wanted to do. But I remember there's things that always stick out in your head. And I remember speaking one of the first ever sound lectures I had. And the guy was saying, here's insane thing about sound. If you're in a movie theater, and movie style has changed. It's not like a classical form anymore. You can have a shaky camera, out of focus, blurry, all these different things. Take the Blair Witch Project, right? Cameras all over the place make you seasick.
Yeah.
If in the middle of that movie, the soundtrack dropped out for a second, you would jolt and it would take you out of the experience.
Wow, that's right.
You can do a lot with picture, but you can actually get away with a lot with picture. But with sound, you've got to get the definition and the refinement and the experiential nature of it just right. So I've always treated it with the same level of detail and focus as picture, as performance, as everything else. There's no real hierarchy in my mind. So when I write, I don't overload it and go, this is the sound of, but I find ways of using language to also, for you to hear the experience as you're reading as well. And sometimes that's just using big chunky words, like whoosh, bang, but almost like old school Batman. But I try and get that experience in. In fact, in this screenplay, the first words are before picture. So I'm imagining the studio logos and I'm describing the sound before we cut to picture, which says something like, and I also describe the sound of the Force and say, there's a noise, it's building, the sound of 1,000 maniacs screaming. It's in your head now. Like, that's the way I like. So my sound designer, Peter, as all great sound designers are they're the ultimate, nerds of their own work and their own process. So he loved reading the script and was like, oh my God, I can hear the movie. I can hear the movie on the page.
That's awesome.
And then it was about translating that into what we needed to do. It needed to be big. It needed to be brash. It's a loud movie, but we also needed to control, because if everything's loud all the time, it loses impact. And that's not as simple as just going, we make it quiet at times. It's actually about the types of dynamics, the type of sounds that you use in certain places. And then specifically, because everything about the film was practical, we tried as best we could to carry that practicality through to the creation of sound. So there's so many digital effects out there where you can go and look up like, oh yeah, sound of book pages in wind or whatever the hell it might be.
Yeah.
There's something for everybody. No, Peter went and got 150-year-old books and an audio setup and would turn those pages for real so that they were.
And why not? Why not? Yeah. Right.
It's the height of creativity at that point. And it's like even working with an act, like, what's your motivation, Peter? I get to go and record the sound of a 150-year-old book. Like, it gets to do something different. So yeah, like, and even while we were mixing the movie, there'd still be gadgets and things getting built and phone calls to designers and studios going, we're not happy with the sound of the doorbell buzzer. It just doesn't sound old enough. And someone will send a photograph and it's like, oh, they've got some old nuts and bolts and keys and they've put it on top of a vibrating pad that they put a current through. And it's like, hey, that's the sound that we want. So we were like super, super practical with everything all the time. Even
here's a phobia I didn't know I had before watching your movie, Lee, and that's eggshells in eggs that are cooking. Oh, it annoys the daylights out of me now.
It's nice. It's nice. I like eggs, but I'm weird. I think that's why I put it. I've got a weird thing with eggs. They're healthy. They're good. They make, something quick to have, but it's like, yeah, I've got a process when I cook eggs. There's just got to be conditions and it's often like simple things that already ick me out that I'll try and subvert them and do something a little. I love the fact that they went and they got a really, really thin needle and injected blood into those eggs. So when you see the blood in the pan or on the floor, that's not like a little digital effect or anything like that. We put the blood in the eggs. When the egg cracked, the blood was already there.
That's so sick. That's sick.
Amazing. Lee, I would love to know what your process, what your experience with the MPAA was, like what your rating experience was like. Was there ever an NC-17 version? Are you surprised at what got by? Like, I'm surprised this is R, to be honest, in the most complimentary way since.
Yeah. I had no involvement with it. I just got told, yeah, we got an R rating. And it's funny, I have the cert saved on my laptop. I keep meaning to get it printed on a mug, maybe with a few blood drips. But I've got a vague memory that could be a dream or a nightmare or maybe the truth that it wasn't like it's going to be an NC-17. We just got a little bit of advisement about maybe trimming like 2 or 3 seconds, if you know what I mean, like at most. But it was after I was like, oh yeah, of course, R-rated makes sense. Because see, I grew up in Ireland where I always knew this movie would be in 18s. And an R rating is a very different thing because you can bring someone young in if they're accompanied appropriately or whatever way it works. Whereas in Ireland, thou shalt not pass if you're under 18, except joyfully lots of young people sneak into the cinema over here and watch it because they heard it's a scary movie. This type of thing that I would have done when I was younger. So the surprise aspect only came later when people would go, "Holy shit, I can't believe you actually got away with it." And I went, "Oh, really?" And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm really glad we did, because we were able to pull in as wide an audience as we possibly could."
All right, Lee, knowing that someone in Ireland is going to buy a ticket to something else and sneak into your film, or already did, what's a film you remember doing that for when you were young that really had an impression on you?
I can't remember a specific one, but I'll tell you an adjacent story, which was when Twister came out.
Yeah.
It was my mother's friend was bringing me and a cousin and her daughter and a few of us, and I was like, "We're going to see Twister." And I was a little bit older than everybody, and they had a really specific, I can't remember what the rating was. It was a 12s. We've got different ratings here, and they've changed over the years. So it's like you had to be over 12, but typically that was flexible. But it was a real thing. You absolutely have to be. And I kept saying to this mother that was bringing me along, going, "Hey, look, got to make sure we go into Twister. Don't say that they're 11. I was 13, and these are the kids." I was like, because she just told me, "What age are they?" "They're 11. They're like, you can't come in." So we had to go and see James and the Giant Peach, the animated movie as well. And I'm a big Roald Dahl fan.
Equally terrifying.
Yeah, different kind of terror. But I remember sitting there the whole time, kind of going, "Could I just go to the bathroom and go in watch Twister?"
Right.
And regret that I didn't do it, because I never saw Twister in theaters in the end.
Oh, man. Yondabond cries.
I know. Hey, Twisters is going to get
Twisters.
made.
Twisters, where the S is a $sign.
Yeah, I can go and check that.
Well, actually, speaking of aliens, because that's what we were referencing in that joke. Fede has moved from Evil Dead and is making the next Alien film. Is there another horror franchise that you would love to jump into?
Not many. Like, I absolutely love that universe, and I'm really happy for Fede as an example. Like, I think that's fantastic, and it's for me, it's the perfect mashup of sci-fi and horror. So, like, it's a really, really, really great place to be. There is one, it's always been there, because I remember when at that same time as I was meeting with Sam and I was signing with my agents that I work with over at CAA. And it's a question that you often get asked in these times: is there like you're asked, is there any franchises? And I said Evil Dead in the room, and thankfully that came together. And the other one that I would, even though I know it would be impossibly hard, but I would love to have a swing at A Nightmare on Elm Street. That is one. But I know instinctively that it would just have to be, I'm not saying apply the same formula as Evil Dead Rise. And I know Freddy is so important in the guise of how he's been, but take the DNA and the essence, take everything that's so vital and special, and see, is there a way of subverting and playing with that in it. And that's the one that, like, if someone brought it to me, I wouldn't go hunting it down in the sense that,
right,
because it would be such a hard chalice to carry. But if someone came to me and said, "Take a look at this," I'd be like, "Oh man, I can't not try and figure this out."
Right.
So
I'd also heard, like, I feel like, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Mike Flanagan also recently say, like, no one can figure out who has the rights to Nightmare? Like, I heard that there's some confusion as to right, like, who owns Freddy, which I find fascinating, that an entire team of Hollywood lawyers can't figure out who has Freddy.
Yeah, I think, and I could be completely wrong, so strike it from the record if I am, but I think oftentimes with certain titles, if they're not, if another movie is made by a certain date, they revert to other people, and right, there might be different ownership there. And all it takes, man, is for someone to have unfortunately left the earth, and it's like you're figuring out an estate or whatever it might be. So it's a little, I know that's happened with Hellraiser over the years, where rights have moved around, and it's like, we got to jam a movie out in the next 18 months, or we won't be able to make another one in X amount of years. So I'm sure the concept, the core brilliance behind that boogeyman in your nightmares can return in some guys. And I've heard there's been obviously some awesome pitches over the years. From, like, I know Peter Jackson had one, and John Saxon had a take as well, I think, back in the day.
Okay.
So yeah, but I said, being like super terrified of the notion of someone giving it to me to take on. But that's the one as well. And there's things I love, like, speaking of Mike, amazing job with Dr. Sleep. I couldn't go near The Shining. I couldn't go near doing something with Jaws, for example, things that I love. But Nightmare on Elm Street, a little bit like Evil Dead, it's got such a range of tonalities and madness. It feels like there's an opportunity to actually bring something new into that space. So yeah.
Yeah, but Flanagan did it. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how The Shining worked into Dr. Sleep. I was stunned how that happened. You do know that making a movie because you have to make it contractually or you'll lose the title is the most creative reason to make a film, though, of course, without question. Yeah, we have to do this or the lawyers will take it from us. So yeah. I am curious, your book prop. Where is your book prop right now?
In a drawer right beside me right now.
You're okay with that?
Yeah, I'm currently on the hunt for the right display case for it. And I'm having a hard time finding the right display case to put it in. So it's wrapped in bubble wrap in a drawer alongside my clapperboard, the copy of Wuthering Heights, one of the medals from the vault, and a couple of other little keepsakes. And I've also got my bloody shoes that I wore, the same pair of white shoes that I wore on set every day. They were my diary. So I got a personalized set of Evil Dead white Adidas Stan Smiths that I wore every single day on set. So I'm trying to find the right display case to have all of these little important aspects.
Not to be too bold, but just because we're wrapping up, is there anything that is accessible to you right now that we could see for the video fans that are watching this?
Let me see. Not to hand, but if you give me 1 second. Hang on.
Of course, take your time.
It is literally just in the bubble wrap. I brought it on a little bit of a tour when I was promoting in the UK and Ireland. I didn't want to travel with it. And I rember I was worried when I flew back from New Zealand that...
Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Holy shit.
That's the hero one. We had a variety of different books for different needs, but we had some with like different paperweights because again, the pages moved for real. Like we used wind, nothing that was CG. We wanted everything to be as practical as we possibly could. But this is kind of the all encompassing, like number one, basically. Like this was the number one book.
Oh my God.
Some people will notice so much news. Like there's even like a bony spine down the back.
Holy shit.
I have goosebumps looking at that, actually.
Yes.
Didn't get to shoot that as much as we would have liked. But I'm just looking here, trying to find a page. Well, there we go. Hang on. Perfect. There's the old history of the Marauder rising up.
Holy shit.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, did you just say on the last day, I'm taking this home?
I think I said it on the first day.
Okay. Well, because I know Warner Brothers, they've got a vault. They've got it. We've been in it. They've got a whole studio full of their shit. I know it's not often as easy as saying, I'm taking this thing home. Yeah, no, it was, we were out on our own in New Zealand and no one was going to stop me. So, it's something that I do treasure and I can't find the right thing to put in. But then also someone very nicely made me a photo album based on the book. Oh, that is fucking awesome.
Of all my memories of promoting the movie. So it's full of photographs from the journey.
Amazing.
That's fantastic.
Oh, that's great.
Which is really, really cool. So I have to find a really special place for that as well.
Oh my God.
Yeah, look, I'm a movie fan and making movies is hard. And sometimes those little rewards, like this is your history. This is your archive. These are the things that this book took, apart from writing it and figuring out how I wanted the book to be on the page, which was determined again. We didn't figure out the book in prep. The book was clearly described what it was, the teeth, the veining, the spine, all of those details. But from when I stepped into prep, which was a 12-week prep, and then we had the book on set probably in the start of week 3. So this was worked on for about 14 weeks with a team of people, team of artists, designers. And then even when it was done, we were still never 100% happy and we were always tweaking and improving. Every one of those pages has been hand-aged by the prop master, who went in and used sandpaper and blow torches, and every single page has been treated that way uniquely. So it's quite special.
That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and for coming on the show, man. We're out of time.
That was fucking awesome.
They're kicking us out, but we could have sat with you for hours, man. This was a blast.
Thanks so much. I hope to talk to you again.
Please, you're welcome anytime. We'd love to have you on. Thank you.
Take care, guys. All the best. Bye-bye.
Awesome.
We want to thank our friends at Warner Brothers Home Video and also to Lee Cronin, who was a terrific guest on the show. And Jake, what was funny is that book moment was so just kind of out of left field. There was a question. Jake and I were prepping the questions before we did the interview. I was kind of like, I wonder where that book is. I wonder where his book is. And so we threw it in at the last minute of just like, hey, where do you have it? And it's so fun. Like we've had a couple of examples of guests who've been on the show where we will point out things that are in their room. Michael Giacchino did this amazing thing where he brought all these props through. Hans Zimmer did this thing as well too. And so that was neat to see his Book of the Dead.
Remember when Zimmer said, yeah, right behind me is where I showed Christopher Nolan the score for Interstellar. I'm like,
yes.
Like, that is insane. If you haven't seen that video of Hans Zimmer on our show, it was amazing. By the way, I was curious, did you ask Lee about directing the family event film of the year, Evil Dead Rise? I was just curious if like he sees that movie. It is a family film, really.
The good news is the fact that it's on Max now, you know, it's bring your kids to the couch, settle them down with a big plate of spaghetti.
Kids have seen that than seen Elemental.
Probably true.
Oh, wow.
Just kidding. Elemental had a great hold week 2. That's a good sign.
We love Pete Zone. We love Pete Zone.
No, that was
The Flash. Should have The Flash.
And just in case we are...
Yeah, but nobody knows what the Flash is.
Very clearly kidding. Do not show your kids Evil Dead Rise, please. It is really brutal.
I would have loved it as a kid.
All right. I'm 39 and I was still horrified by it. I mean, it's actually one of the best horror films I've seen in a long time. But did you guys think that when you watched it that it was probably, and this might sound strange, I felt like there was no safety when I watched that film, because generally speaking, like there are certain characters who are off limits of getting hurt, but they just go all out in this film, like kids and to a point where I could not believe how shocking the violence was. I felt it in my stomach, kind of like probably the first time I felt that way, probably since Dr. Sleep or Sinister, where the movie was so brutally atmospheric in the way it was designed and the way it was utilizing its violence that no one felt safe. That's why Dr. Sleep is so terrifying, because of Jacob Tremblay's sequence. Or
but I mean, he talks about his sound design and the work he did on his sound design in that. Like, there's a scene in the beginning with the scalp. There's a scalp hitting a deck or a dock. I'm not sure what you use in that instance, and it's really horrible. It's horrible. It's just horrible. So, and then I don't want to go too deep into specifics in case people are listening to this and haven't yet seen Evil Dead Rise, but you should. It's on home video now. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny episode, and so we're gonna get to review the film in a hot second. But before we do that, it's tier list time. And again,
tier list time.
Visual element of the show. Go to the YouTube channel so you can see this amazing graphic that Gabe pulls up whenever we do one of the tier lists.
Yeah, so to hop into it, if it's your first time joining us for a tier list, I'll give you the rigmarole. We are going to go through each film of the franchise and rank it from S tier, which is above and beyond, through F, and haven't seen. But we've seen all of these, save for I haven't seen Dial of Destiny yet. I'm seeing that this weekend, but these gentlemen have, and they'll add it to our tier list. But yeah, we're going to go through, have a general discussion about each of these films, and then we'll each give our rank of where we would put it on our own list. We average that out, and that becomes the ReelBlend ranking. Yes, Sean?
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Is this one of the situations where we can only have one S?
No, that is
the same thing.
We in the past, we've reserved that for filmmakers. We wanted to have a masterpiece. For franchises, we have tons of S's. This is a limited franchise. We could do that if we want to.
Do you guys want to? I think that actually would make it harder because there's only 5.
No, I would like. Well,
here's the thing.
Not to show our hand, but I think if we need to abide by the same rules for all series, if it feels weird to shake it up.
I see what you're saying, for continuity, for consistency's sake.
And I was going to start with this. We can just dive into it because we'll get to each one, so we don't have to go on a complete tangent with this. I've only seen 4 of these 5, and I would argue there are 3 S's. But we will come back around, and we will start with Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Who wants to start us off? Jake, I know you just rewatched all of these fairly recently. Do you want to jump in?
I mean, Raiders is an S, not just within the realm of the Indiana Jones franchise, but in the realm of cinema. Like, if you were going to rank the movies of the 80s or, the greatest films of all time, Raiders would be an S. It is a perfect film.
Seminal. It's not a seminal action movie. Yeah. It's not a seminal, dramatic movie or whatever. It is just seminal film, the art form.
Yeah. It's Spielberg and George Lucas defining our childhood by paying homage to the things that define their childhood. It's an absolute masterpiece of adventure.
And we use this phrase often for films like this, and what I will say is there isn't an ounce of fat on this movie. No. Like, Every scene is important. There's not a lull. Exposition is exciting. It's terrific. It might have the, I think it has one of the most flawless runtimes of all time. And you say it defines our childhood, and that's, of course, it came around at a certain point. But the thing about Raiders is that you could show it to any generation at any time.
Yeah.
And I think that they're going to dial into it. And
Yeah,
I'll use my own boys as an example. Brendan went through a phase when he was a little kid where he was obsessed with Indiana Jones, obsessed, because it hit him in that sweet spot of right where he was at that age. And it's just, adventure has a name, and it's Indiana Jones.
And it's kind of, sorry, go ahead, Kev.
I think Raiders is as close to a perfect film as you can get. It's like I always think of Godfather Part 2. Raiders is essentially perfect. Just in terms of, I don't have any issues with the pacing in Raiders. The action is fantastic. Also, Phoebe Waller-Bridge said this the other day, which I thought was really interesting, which was when Raiders came out, Indiana Jones wasn't an iconic character. Steven Spielberg just drops you into this world. I mean, if you could go back to that year and watch that film outside of the concept of who Indiana Jones is to us now, and just the way that movie was made for the audience at the time before Indy was iconic, is pretty incredible, because the moment we're dropped into this world and you have these dueling characters. I mean, I would argue that, Indy as a teacher and Indy, and doing the Indiana Jones type thing is really, it's a Clark Kent Superman type thing, I would argue. At home, he's a teacher and everybody loves him as a teacher, but then he goes out into the world and he's doing these, I wouldn't say, I guess, superhuman type things at times, or escaping death in very insane situations. But the opening of Raiders is so brilliant too. Just the way we're behind Harrison Ford as we're walking up, and then with the Steven Spielberg reveal, and he turns around. And also think about these things that now have become iconic: the hat, the whip, the boulder. I mean, all these things in the time period in that vacuum. Song. Yeah, these were all just pieces of a movie that had not become iconic yet. But I will say this: one of the things I do love about Raiders, aside from the runtime and the perfect pacing, is as I rewatched it before my recent Harrison Ford interview, they do a really good job of making Indiana Jones this character who seems like he's not vulnerable and seems like he doesn't have an ability to be hurt emotionally. And he kind of has this hard surface to him. And then there's this moment where he thinks Marion's dead, and then he realizes she's alive, and he grabs her and kisses her. And and in the rewatch, that hit me differently at 39 years old than it did as a kid, because it was just this moment of the piercing the armor of this guy. Because this guy, it felt like he could just walk through life and just do whatever he wanted to do in terms of his confidence. But then to see him kind of break a bit. Same thing happened in Last Crusade, which we'll get to, when he's saying dad, or he's tied to Sean Connery, or there's just these moments of vulnerability that I think pay off so beautifully in Dial of Destiny. And that rewatching Raiders kind of solidified that concept of this character being so interesting and full of it's a fully realized, beautiful character that's not just one note. There's so much to him. It's insane.
One thing for me that always stands out about this film when I rewatch it is that I don't think there's a film that does this better. I think this is the blueprint, and this is the definition of creating an icon and creating iconography. I would recommend anyone who wants to rewatch it to think of it through that filter and just kind of watch it thinking about what Spielberg was thinking about and some of his motivations, because it's so clear how intentional it is for him to create Indiana Jones to have that stick in your head as a character, as an icon, whether it's obviously the opening and the way that he's revealed, all the way down to the costume and everything. The scene for me that really puts that together is of the silhouette when they're digging on the hill.
Oh,
that
the
scene,
sun.
When he does that is the most simple image. When he breaks it down to a literal icon, it's a silhouette of Indiana Jones, that if you see anything that it looks like that, you think Indiana Jones. And he does that after the only scene in the movie where he's dressed like another character. He's in the disguise with the robes on.
Oh, right.
It always strikes me at how intentional Spielberg is in that moment of, I hid my character for a scene, for a sequence. And now in the very next one, I'm going to give that simple shot to remind you that this is the icon. This is the character that the name on the poster. Yep. And I think that throughout, there's many through lines, as Kevin mentioned, whether it's the emotions or even just the plot itself that are extraordinary. But for me, thinking about Spielberg, especially Spielberg in his prime, Spielberg like really humming, this is one thing that he contributed, I think, for filmmakers ever since then, about how to use the tools of filmmaking to create something iconic. I think it's fantastic.
I do find it really fascinating, though, to think about things like that in a vacuum kind of thing, like even with Jaws or films that have become iconic that were made at the time before there was any iconic aspect to it. And because remember, this movie was just called Raiders of the Lost Ark when it first came out, right? So it was just Raiders of the Lost Ark, I believe, right? There was no Indiana Jones in the title.
It's still Raiders of the Lost Ark. Anyone who changes it to that other title is ridiculous to me. I won't accept that.
But as a series, as we're looking at it right now on the screen, that's just how it's been. It's like Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars was Star Wars. Now it's episode 4, New Hope.
Right. It's always going to be Star Wars.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But in all honesty, like, I think Raiders, and this is going to be a hot take. I actually think Raiders is my favorite Harrison Ford performance, favorite Harrison Ford movie. And I also think I like John Williams' Indy theme more than Star Wars.
Oh, I agree with that.
I just think, and I love Star Wars. I love the Star Wars theme. It's weird. Growing up, I was more of an indie fan from a trilogy perspective than I was a Star Wars fan. I would always argue that Indy and Lord of the Rings were my favorite trilogies, and Star Wars was great. I love Star Wars, but I always really found myself attracted to or more immersed in the world of Indy because there was just something, I don't know, there's something different about it. And obviously it's more grounded. Clearly they went into aliens in the fourth one, but to me, it's just, I don't know. I love that. I love this character so much.
I know we're
safe to say.
Yeah, that's an S. But while you're putting it up into S, I want to bring up this idea of creating iconography because I find this to be really interesting. And while we're having this conversation right now, because I don't know if the filmmakers who are making these movies in the moment are thinking in those terms. I think when George Lucas was making Star Wars, he was just trying to complete his movie. Maybe. And I even think with Spielberg, I don't think Spielberg was thinking of this as a franchise that we would still be talking about 40 years later.
I don't think it necessarily, not in the terms of a franchise. Again, that's why it's not called Indiana Jones. Yeah. But I think that he was absolutely pulling from his own childhood and these larger than life characters and these big tentpole movies, so to speak, at the time that were centered on a hero. And I think it's so clear how much attention he was paying to all those details to create something that is recognizable, that it's when you see a whip, you think of Indiana Jones. When you see that style of hat, you think of Indiana Jones. When you look at Lara Croft or Uncharted, all you can see is this is Indiana Jones in a new,
do you know the closest thing that I think compares in our generation post Raiders is The Matrix. I think all the iconography that comes with The Matrix is instantly associated with The Matrix.
Glasses, jacket, also
leather trench coats.
Gabe brings up an interesting point because while I'm kind of with both of you, I don't know that Spielberg knew, in his mind, like I'm creating an icon, but then the shot choice that Gabe brings up is fascinating because that's my favorite shot in any Indiana Jones film. I think it's also Jake's as well. And you're right, though, because while he may not have think, okay, this is going to be iconic in 30, 40 years.
Yeah, I don't think he was thinking that in that terms. I think he was literally graphically thinking of it as, I am creating the visual of this character has to be as recognizable as Harrison Ford himself.
Mm-hmm. You're right. And I mean, if you took that image and just like zoomed into his silhouette without any indication of telling the person what it was or where it's from.
And what question I'd love to ask
anybody wouldn't know.
I'd love to ask Spielberg anything, obviously, but I'd love to ask Spielberg about that, about like, is that true? Is that a good read? But I also wonder, does that come from the storytelling standpoint or does that come from this is Han Solo and I need people not to see Han Solo? Like, I wonder
it could be that too.
How many different motivations there could be.
Sure.
For trying to give it such a striking.
I interviewed like 2 years ago Deborah Nadoolman, who did all the costume design. She got an Oscar nomination for doing the costume design for Raiders of the Lost Ark.
It's a great piece. You have that on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, it's on my YouTube channel.
Check that out.
And she said that whenever she met Spielberg, whenever they were going through what Indy was going to look like, he kept saying, well, I want this and I want this and I want this. And she just goes, just draw it. Just draw just draw it. And she still has it to this day. She sent me a picture of it. She still he drew Indiana Jones, like with the hat and everything.
She should sell that sketch. She got millions.
Really quick, before we move on to Temple, I want to run something by you guys to see how you feel about this. It is, I don't know if you've heard like the Raiders controversy in terms of the flaw of the movie. And in fact, there's an entire Big Bang Theory episode about it.
Is it where he ends up on the outside of a submarine and then somehow gets inside of it?
It is that Indiana Jones has no impact whatsoever on the outcome of the story.
Oh yeah, I think that's accurate. I mean, I don't think that's wrong.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things. It's like, I guess technically, yes, it doesn't ruin the movie for me.
Don't want to know. Yeah.
I mean, it's just that. It's just that whether or not Indy was there, the Nazis get the Ark to the island, open it up, and they all die.
Yeah.
It happens whether or not he's there or not.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
But then I guess the difference being that America ends up with the Ark.
Right.
Sure.
Huh.
Yeah.
But that's sort of just reducing down that one scene. Though.
Sure,
it's not necessarily.
If you get the chance, it's a very funny Big Bang Theory episode, and in fact, at the beginning of the episode, Sheldon's girlfriend, quote unquote, ruins Raiders for him by pointing that out. So he spends the entirety of the episode finding things that she loves and trying to ruin them for her as a result.
Nice. That's funny. Well, let's pick it up because we do have a review to get to as well. So we'll probably. I think we've talked about Indiana Jones as a character, as a product a lot there. So we'll try not to retread that. Temple of Doom. I will go first quickly just because I said I think there are 3 S's. Thinking about doing this, I wrestled with the external pressure of sort of Temple of Doom being viewed as subpar. For me, I can't get over the fact that I think as a kid this might have been my favorite one. And so for me, I think it's so much fun. I think that especially at a young age, it felt so dangerous. It felt like, pulling the heart out and the monkey brains, and like it felt so dark at that age. On top of the fact that Short Round was just the perfect surrogate for a young kid watching someone getting to hang out with Indiana Jones.
It's like Last Action Hero almost, like the idea of a kid just going along with this iconic character. I
couldn't possibly give it an A just because, not everyone agrees with me. And I wrestle with that a little bit, thinking like, well, am I wrong? Should I think of this more? But for me, it's an S. I will let you guys go from here. But for me, it's just a perfect movie.
Go ahead, Jake.
I'm gonna give it a B. It is flawed for me. It's one of those frustrating movies where the stuff in the movie I love beyond measure, and I worship like when it works. But the stuff I don't like, I'm looking at.
Do you still not like the opening after your rewatch?
It is still my least of the 5 movies. It is my least favorite opening, and I'm sorry. Kate Capshaw almost derails the movie and almost honestly brings it down further than a B. I get that they were trying to do something opposite of Marion, but that has got to be one of the most grating characters and recent memory, how long ago this movie came out. But and also too, because also keep in mind, it's also one of my least favorite renditions of Indy. In that, because keep in mind, this takes place before Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it's really, it shows how far he's come as a character, because they really emphasize that like this Indy is not doing things because it quote unquote belongs in a museum. He's doing things for like money and glory at this point. And it's nice to sort of know that the character evolved. Fortune and glory, excuse me. Fortune and glory.
Right. God's sakes.
And so it's just, I like my Indy doing things for the right reason. I like my Indy, saving things because, they belong in a museum. So like seeing him do it for the wrong reason back in the day was sort of and I get that's sort of the evolution of that film. I don't know. And there's just a lot of stuff about this movie that hasn't aged well. But Kate Capshaw leading the way in terms of a handful of things that just keep this from even being
like when
an
she
A for
puts
me.
perfume on the elephant to make it smell better.
Just her screaming Indy's name just throughout the entirety of the movie. It really.
Kev, where are you at?
So I rewatched this film as well before my interview, and Temple still has my favorite opening. I'm in an A for this.
Awesome.
I don't disagree with Jake about Kate Capshaw. That definitely is a lot more obvious now to me as I watch it as an older age. And again, there's nothing. Her performance is fine. It's just there's something about, like Jake said, about her yelling his name over and over again. And I would literally just sit there and think, I want to hear what other people are saying in this scene. And I think the short round character is incredible. I'm very, very listen. That film, as I watched it recently, it's one of the most violent movies that I can imagine having a PG rating. And this is obviously, this is not new news, but that's the movie that eventually led to the PG-13, which was Red Dawn, the first PG-13 ever, I believe, because Temple of Doom was so brutal. But even like the monkey brain scene, that whole sequence to me is just it's almost to a point of like, I can't watch it. I have to fast forward through that scene. And maybe it's just a gross out factor. I don't know. But that scene just rubs me the wrong way in terms of like, I don't know. I don't love that scene. And as I watch it as I get older, I literally skip it. That's just too gross. But Temple has so many great moments in it that I can't go below an A. But I understand
the ceiling coming down, the spike ceiling, like it's such a great sequence.
Great scene. And as Jake said, some of the, there's things in this film that didn't age well, and I don't know. I've always felt like I've defended Temple, even when we had Quentin Tarantino on at his house, which sounds insane to say. Tarantino defended Temple of Doom as well, and and what he thought about that movie.
Did he say he didn't like it? I forgot.
No, he said he did like it.
It's his favorite Spielberg.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's his favorite Spielberg.
What
did he say?
Oh no, he said no.
Me and Tarantino happen
Jaws.
to have a lot in common, guys. What can I say?
Yeah, no, I think he said Jaws was the best movie ever made, but I think he said Temple.
Right.
He likes Temple. I don't want to put words in his mouth. So
I think you're right. It was something like Jaws was the best movie, and he was specific about movie and not film, and he kind of think he made that difference. And then I think he might have said Temple was his favorite.
So I'm gonna get to Sean, but I'm in an A for this one. Cool. I do agree with Jake though. The Kate Capshaw thing, as I get older, is also, dude, when they burn that guy alive after they pull his heart out, it is so brutal. It's so brutal.
That's movie making, baby. Special effects. It's awesome. Classic. Sean, where are you at?
I think I'm gonna go A also, but I'm a lot closer to B than I thought I was. And again, this is from a rewatch. I don't think the pacing of it is as good as I remembered it to be. Like Kevin just said, I kind of ended up skipping over a few chunks, especially in that front half.
It's so incredible that something that has and I'm not putting this down, your guys' opinions on this, but it's so incredible, this series, that we're splitting the hairs of the A and the B or whatever, but think about how many iconic, like the bridge scene, like how many scenes in this are
that's
just
what salvages it from the minute they get into the mine cars through the
mine cars
scene.
Awesome.
The mine car sequence. You know what killed me though on the rewatch? The raft. That kid with I didn't mind the raft. I think the raft looks fine for what it is. I think they know that looks goofy. The kid with the what are those dolls where you stab them and Indy feels the pain?
The voodoo doll, is that right?
God, did that sequence go on for like a half an hour? I didn't remember that scene being so long. And it was, and Harrison Ford is doing like the worst kind of.
But he's on the conveyor belt. That's what the conveyor belt. Like another
I know.
great...
Spielberg cut to those rocks being grinded up like 100
Spielberg's
times.
approach in that was just, how can I stitch together a suspenseful bit of machinery, that's so
much.
I think the biggest difference between Raiders and Temple is Raiders is more fun. It's just more fun. It's just more fun.
Yeah,
this one's
dark.
This one's dark.
Temple's
Raiders
dark.
is flawless and Temple is flawed.
Temple has flaws, so I'm leaning B, but I think the sequences.
It sounds like you're describing a B. I'm not trying to get you to agree with me, but it sounds like you're
because
describing
the sequences. I think it has a shot. I think there's a shot in this movie that I think rivals the horizon, the Sunset Horizon shot, which is I think I was telling Jake this on when the mine car rolls up on Indiana Jones after he has broken the spell. And it kind of the light comes up from like his and catches him in his face, and you realize it's Indiana Jones again. I think that's a better shot. I think that's a better shot of the hero.
All right,
stepping back into. But
Either way, the opening is amazing.
Whether you picked A or B, that's gonna put us at an A for Temple of Doom. So we have S for Raiders, A for Temple of Doom for those who are only listening audio. But come on over to YouTube, hang out with us, drop your thoughts in the comments. That's what's fun about YouTube. But we're going to jump into Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Right,
Sean, do you want to start us?
I would love to start us because this is a B and it can't go any higher. It's the weakest of the three.
Wait, what?
Interesting.
You're joking, right?
Wait, did you say B?
B. This is a B, and it shouldn't be.
You're saying The Last Crusade is a B?
I'm saying The Last Crusade is a B.
I thought Temple was your lowest.
Are you doing like you're a bit? Or you're
not doing a bit. No.
Jake, he's doing a bit. He's doing a bit.
No. Here's
the TikTok, folks.
You guys have a nostalgic aspect to Crusade because it probably, I'm going to guess for most of you guys, was the first one you saw.
No, Raiders, for me, it was always Raiders.
No, Raiders, yeah.
Raiders was the one that I...
Because Crusade was the one that I think probably came to theaters around the time that you guys were, of the age of going to the theaters and absorbing it.
Yeah, because Sean, Sean was already 70
I was covering the serials from 1940 that Spielberg was referencing in Raiders.
Mr. Spielberg, can I ask you a question? That's how Sean used to talk like that.
Mr. Spielberg.
Sean used to talk like that, guys.
Who's the blonde girl in Crusade? Ilsa?
Mm-hmm.
Ilsa?
The Nazi?
The one that he meets in Venice.
The least memorable Indiana Jones love interest, essentially. I'd even put Kate Capshaw above her. I don't think there's anything memorable about her as a character.
But see, I don't really think of her as like a love interest though, for some
reason.
And
the father-son dynamic doesn't work for me the way that it works for other people. I think it's hacky. I think their shtick gets old incredibly fast.
Yeah. No. See, for me, this is my Sean Connery movie.
Oh, The Rock. It's fascinating to me.
Well, like I'm talking about from the way that I didn't see any of these until a decade after this movie came out.
The comedy in this one doesn't hit for me. It doesn't play for me. Like when the two of them are in the chairs tied side by side and they gotta hop around because the flames are coming. It's just I think
tearing down an iconic
when he throws
scene.
the guy and he's like, no ticket.
I think I mean, there's so many elements of this movie that throughout the middle of it that I think could just get pulled out. I think the opening train sequence is fantastic. I actually, this is a selfish reason to say that why I wish River Phoenix had lived. I wish River Phoenix was still with us for multiple roles, but I think it would have been tremendous if River Phoenix was still an actor today and could have assumed the Indiana Jones role as an older person. He would have been a natural person to sort of step in for Ford and continue the franchise, but he was outstanding in that opening sequence. And then everything with the Grail at the end is great. That's great. Those two bookends are terrific. I think in the middle, there's enough forgettable stuff that it's a B for me.
Jake, I'm going to ask for your, because I know you have a hard out. So I'll ask for your truncated, give me your quick thoughts, but also your grade.
It's an S for me. Not only do I think it's an absolute masterpiece of Indiana Jones, it's top 10 Spielberg for me. It is just, it's everything that, and we'll get into it. It's everything that I really wish Dial of Destiny was, and that it's just sweeping all over I love it. Absolutely love Last Crusade. I think the dynamic between Sean Connery and Harrison Ford is one of the best aspects of any of the 5 films.
Am I wrong in saying that? I feel like some people hold this up as their favorite or the best. Like, I think that's why I'm so surprised.
Yeah, I thought Sean did.
Okay, Kev. No. So Kev, you think this is the best?
This is Crusade's my favorite. I think Raiders is overall the better movie.
Sure, okay.
But Crusade is an S, no question. The River Phoenix opening is incredible. The Sean Connery dynamic is incredible. The name reveal. There's just so much in this film that I love, and I think that chemistry between him and Sean Connery to me is what makes this film an S, no question. Yeah. And I think at the same time, so like, but I'm also, and Sean and I argue about this all the time.
You talk about Kate Capshaw saying Indy a million times.
Okay,
if I had to hear Sean Connery say
Juniors, that's awesome.
No, it's not.
We named the dog Indiana.
It's fine the first 100 times, and then after that, it's just tiresome.
But I'm just gonna spit.
That's his name,
Junior.
But that's the payoff. That's the emotional payoff, though, when he finally calls him Indiana.
Yeah.
Like 3 or 4.
And he only calls him Indiana.
I'm pretty sure
whenever he says "let it go."
Didn't Spielberg say that's like his favorite? It's his like favorite. Maybe I'm misquoting of who was it, but I want to say it was like Spielberg's favorite moment in Indiana Jones.
Yeah, Indiana "Let It Go" is one of the all-time best Spielberg moments ever.
They should also change the name of this one to Indiana Jones and the Crusade. Right before the next to last.
Well, I saw someone tweeted that, like, isn't it weird that of a 5-film series, 3 of the films were meant to be like series finales?
Yeah.
Well, Kev, give me your quick. This is your go. I want to get to you so that you have time to talk it up because I know it's your fave.
But all I wanted to say was I just somehow, for some reason, I'm attracted to the third film in a lot of trilogies. So like, Back to the Future 3.
It's like the payoff, maybe.
But Back to the Future 3 is my favorite of the trilogy. Die Hard 3 is my favorite of the trilogy. Indy 3 is my favorite of the trilogy. Return of the King is my favorite of the trilogy.
Wow.
I don't know what it is about the thirds, but like those are 4 examples. And weirdly enough, I would rather watch Return of the Jedi than the other 2. I just think it's more fun. And so I think the Return of the Jedi opener is my favorite.
Is his favorite.
No,
that's what he said. You heard it here.
But my favorite opening of a Star Wars movie is Return of the Jedi. So I don't know what it is about 3s, but I'm a big 3 guy. I don't know. All right.
Now we have the 4th film in the franchise, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I also have not. It's due for a rewatch. I also have not seen this since it came out, which I think is telling of my opinion of it. But
it's a C.
Jake,
it's a C.
Jake, I know you rewatched it. Sean, did you as well recently?
Yeah, it's a C. I think it's a C.
Okay.
I think even with the elements that work, it can't go higher than a C.
Jake?
Yeah, it's a C for me as well. And it's the thing is, it's a frustrating C. And I feel like I'm going to describe it in the same way they describe Temple of Doom, in that like, the stuff that it's frustrating because there is stuff that really works in there. Like somewhere in there are like kernels of great indie moments. Like say what you want to about like the whole nuke the fridge thing. I love the opening in the warehouse, and I love that it's the warehouse from the end of Raiders. I thought that was great. I don't mind the alien. I know that the thing is that they're not even really aliens. What is it? They're creatures from like other dimensions. They're interdimensional beings. I don't think they ever use the word aliens because like if Indy is supposed to be sort of reflective of the media that was sort of popular at the time of when the story is existing, it feels natural that there would be like an Indiana Jones Area 51 kind of like that. Sure. That doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. But there are just so many moments and decisions where you just look at it and go, "What are you thinking?" Like, and I know the one everyone points to is Mutt is Shia LaBeouf swinging on.
Awful.
But what's frustrating is
the
like
worst scene in any Spielberg movie ever made.
But what's frustrating is that comes in the middle of what I thought was a really great chase scene. I think that chase scene through the jungle is kind of cool.
It is good.
Like there are moments where and even in the moments, even in like the sequences that aren't great, it's still like Spielberg still knows how to direct a scene. Like there's. The shit's still directed well. So it's frustrating for me to say C because it should be better, but I agree with Sean. I can't go higher than a C.
From recollection, I also had it at a C. Kev, do you have any strong thoughts? Do you have from memory, where would you put it?
Nothing to add except for it's a C, and I haven't seen it since it first came out. Now, I will say I did love that opening of Crystal Skull. I think the Crystal Skull opener is great.
Even the bomb thing. I think the bomb thing is fun.
And Ray Winstone, right? I actually think he's good at it.
We have arrived. I have to give you guys some time here to give your spoiler-free reactions, reviews to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And then we will hop back into this briefly to add it to this list.
Okay.
But who wants to start us off?
So I'd like to start because I think the only question that we need to answer, because the only reason that this movie exists is because the people involved with Indiana Jones wanted to give the character a better send off than what he received in Crystal Skull. And I think that they gave him a far better send off, a much more proper capper to the franchise. They managed to stick the landing by giving themselves another shot at it, basically. But in addition to that, James Mangold did an excellent job of taking over for Steven Spielberg, which is not easy to do, especially with his seminal franchise or one of his seminal franchises. And Harrison Ford, to me, was more invested than I'd seen him in a film in a really long time. I thought that he was truly... pardon the pun, dialed into what he needed to do for this character.
Would you say he was
time.
Destined to play this role?
And the guys I'm sure are going to mention Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who is terrific in this part.
Excellent.
And Indy, it feels like Indy needs a counterpart in almost all of these films, and she's probably one of the strongest ones that we've seen up to this point. The action set pieces are terrific. The MacGuffin that they're chasing is significant. We're going to talk about another summer blockbuster later on this year that I think has a terribly weak MacGuffin and ruined the film for me. But this is not the case with this one. I thought the Dial of Destiny is fantastic. I read a quote about Mangold where later on we'll be able to talk about the third act, I guess, but he gives some explanations as to what happens in that third act. And I thought all of his explanations made a ton of sense. I think Kevin said it this way. I was laughing the whole time. I was just like giddy with what this film was able to do. It acknowledges his age. The age is part of the action. And I was into it from the get-go. I thought the opening sequence with the flashback is phenomenal. It was one of those things where I was able to surf over any kind of like a technical aspect where I was like, ooh, maybe that, and it was funny because I'm the one who was beating it up, and looking at that green screen stuff from the chase scene that they kept showing. And Kevin said to me, because he got to see it earlier, he was like, no, I didn't even notice it in that moment. And sure enough, when I got to that chase, I was like, no, I don't care. I'm so along for the ride. I'm so along with what this movie is doing that I am thrilled that Dial of Destiny got made and is back in theaters for Indiana Jones. Forget one last ride and send the character off the way he should go.
Jake?
Yeah, what's funny is I think I was the first one of the group to see it, and I walked out going, I liked that. I liked it. The more I think about it, the more I'm into it. The more I think about it, the more I sit and settle with it, the more it's all working for me. I agree with Shauna that it is a really nice, not perfect, but a really nice send off and farewell. Without getting to spoilers, it takes a big swing in the final act, a big swing. And I think it's good. A lot of people are going to be along for the ride and then potentially go one of two directions with that. But, I was even thinking about that and like, imagine watching Raiders I think sometimes we forget that all of the movies take big swings.
They do.
In the last act, but we've come to accept them as just part of the story.
Opening the box and melting everybody's face.
No one questions it, but the fact that they open the ark and imagine being in the theaters and you're watching a fairly straightforward adventure, and then at the very end the dude's face gets melted off and all these spirits come out of the ark. Or
he finds a knight from Christ's time.
After I kind of settled with it, and again, sometimes this is nice to have the opportunity to see a movie and let it and not have to, as we often complain about, have to knee-jerk react to give a review immediately. Sometimes it's nice to settle with a movie, and it really did give me a perspective of no, this is an Indiana Jones movie. This is what an Indiana Jones movie is, and it does very well what I love most about Indiana Jones movies. Mm-hmm. So I'm very happy with it, and I honestly think it is one of the best performances of Harrison Ford's career.
Yeah. Before we get to the tier list, we have Kevin's review. Kevin, where are you at?
I loved this film. Might be my favorite movie of the year so far.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome.
I was just, and again, I sat down in that theater, and it went by so fast. To me, this is a better Spielberg film than Crystal Skull. And it sounds crazy to say, but I think Mangold captured Spielberg's magic that was very apparent in the first three. Not that Crystal Skull doesn't have Spielberg magic, of course it does, but this to me felt more Spielberg than Crystal Skull, and that sounds strange to say. I think the Phoebe Waller-Bridge dynamic is awesome. The action is awesome, and Sean brings up a point about effects and green screen and things like that. Sometimes when you're so narratively in a sequence, suspension of disbelief wise, like, and you're just like, if the action is serving the narrative, those things, and I'm not saying that that green screen needs to be perfect. I mean, there are shots that I was like, oh, okay, that could have been done a little better. But there are some times when you're swept up in an action sequence and it's serving the narrative in a great way, because one thing I think Mangold does well here is every single bit of action services the characters. It services the story. It services their intentions, where they're doing, what they're trying to get to. And I think when you're swept up that way, it just plays differently. The third act to me is one of the most special, in my opinion, one of the most special aspects that's ever happened to Indy's character. I won't go into details. When we get into spoilers, we can, but there's an emotional beat to that third act that to me is the entirety of who Indy is in terms of an arc. No pun intended, but you go back to Raiders and when you go back to Raiders, though, the guy you meet in Raiders, that Indy, and I know Temple's before that, from a chronological standpoint, but the character we meet in Raiders to the end of this film and the character that Indy is, to me, that was the whole. That's it. I can't say anything else about it, but I will tell you that
terrific
there's a
character
look.
arc.
There's an arc that he gets that just floored me. And
we're also leaving out the fact that at the end of Crystal Skull, he sees a spaceship surface from the ground.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff that we just have to go with with this franchise.
To Jake's point, though, you're either going to be in or out on how this third act unfolds. And I was just sitting there in the theater going, there's just shots of Indy's face that I think were things I wanted to see from him since the 80s. It was just kind of a beautiful thing, and it's a beautiful tribute. And I gotta say, and this is not a spoiler, this is just a tip to what Mangold did. I think the ending of this film is perfect. Like there's the last 5 minutes and the last shot, I think, are perfect. Like they're literally perfect.
Also, and again, this is also not a spoiler. Their explanation for why Shia LaBeouf is not in this film is it is cool. It is fantastic.
Oh, that scene. There's a scene on a boat. That's so great. That scene is so great.
All that being said, because we can't get into specifics and spoilers, there are one or two things throughout it that make me put it in an A. I think it's an A. I don't think it's an S. I think it's an A.
It's definitely an A. I mean, there's no. I'm at an A as well, and my.
It's not original trilogy.
Right. It's but I will say it made me feel like I was watching the original trilogy. Agreed. And I would argue, and this might sound blasphemous and people can kill me all they want. I think it's right there with Temple, if not slightly better.
Cool. I think that's
so.
Fine.
We have two A's. Jake,
I would go very high B.
Okay.
Just because it's just so new and it's hard for me to consider putting it quite as an A, but reserve the right when we're still bitching about this in 20 years to move it back up to an A.
Cool. Well, that's our tier list.
The third act is an S in my opinion. But that's just.
I think anyone would be. I think any filmmaker would look at that and go, "Okay, I'm happy." Yeah.
For the folks at home listening to audio only. In the S tier, we have Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade. At A, we have Temple of Doom and The Dial of Destiny, which I think is a firm recommendation to go see that this weekend. And then coming in at C, our only C, and our only thing below an A is Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I don't think is any surprise. Before we close out the episode, Kevin, I do have to ask a question. If they come to you and ask, will you let them quote you on the box that says, my favorite movie of the year, Kevin McCarthy, and then in parentheses it says, I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet.
It comes with an asterisk and Disney puts but he hasn't seen Oppenheimer. Review as of this date.
And then really far below that in really tiny font, and he's not ready.
He's not ready.
He's still not ready. I mean, it's only June.
I thought a fun note to end on. I did get an email today asking if it would be okay if they quoted me for the box, for the Blu-ray box of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which now makes it 2 for 2 in terms of things that Sean has written books about that I've ended up on the DVD cover of.
Yeah, Jake is including on the Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League DVD. And now he's going to be on Across the Spider-Verse.
And I can't wait to find out what Bruce Willis DVD I'm going to be on.
Beautiful.
Asshole.
They retro released Die Hard 1.
That's what I said. I said they're going to put Die Hard out and they ain't going to quote me on it.
Just to put his quote on it. All right, let's start wrapping this up. This week's call to action. And then the place to go interact with this is in the comments below the YouTube video. We want to turn the tier list over to you guys. Give us your tier list for the Indiana Jones franchise. Where are you putting the 5 films in the series? If you are going out this weekend to go see Dial of Destiny and you want to wait until you have that to be able to put in your tier list, then drop it over the weekend. But let us know if you agree with us or if you have a totally different tier list from where we ended up. Yes, Gabriel.
I have, not to just completely muddle this new thing that we're doing, but I have a second thing that I want to ask our audience to include in the comments, which I think will be fun.
A little confusing.
It's a little confusing. No, give us your tier list. Okay, you can do that. You can head over to Tier Maker, and I put together a custom one that has all of it in there. You can probably find that and use that. But I also want to ask, because this week, the gentleman over at the Light the Fuse podcast announced that they are now the official podcast of the Mission Impossible franchise. We're a bit of a jack of all trades. We cover everything. We're not that as specific. So I want to ask our diehard listeners, if we were the official podcast of anything, what would we be?
Nolan.
That's a good call to action. The good call.
I want to be the official Nolan.
I couldn't do a weekly podcast with Kevin saying I'm just whispering I'm not ready into a microphone. I couldn't do it.
Is there an official Nolan podcast? Is there a podcast dedicated to his films? Because I feel like there should be.
Probably. There's only 7 Mission films. Nolan has how many movies? It's probably close
Kevin's
to
pitching
8,
a new
9.
podcast.
We literally could do. Man, I would freak out. Start with following, and then
yes, we're aware. We know.
Take us out, Sean. Take us out.
I feel like we are in a Nolan tier list, and I feel like we also should do a Mission tier list, right?
We'll see.
I'm pre-teasing ahead of what we're going there.
We'll see, folks.
Well, anyway, keep
a tier list for movies named Barbie
to find out if we're actually going to be doing this in the near future. And in the meantime, follow us on social media at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV, at Sean_O'Connell, at Gabe Kovach, and the show is at ReelBlend. We look forward to seeing your comments underneath the YouTube channel, the 2 calls to actions, and we'll be back next week with some fun new interviews. Until then,
Oppenheimer,
hockey pads,
the man who moved the earth.